Nyanje jembo to the mingmi jang gong ne monam jembo nga ja ta akra tar ngam zan to sherma tumba de je jala ki jom sar teni chom den de chi chetan dam ba ramjur la ramjur choda le zam ba chama me pe chog ba nan jer song shi ramjur ji jang sora chom den de dak je wa dam ba ti zhon zhe jang charwa mufcho te chi la ta jina chondon de da ko ngomber charwa tirchigna yangbi chongchir chimbo lzam ba chma me pi chagbi khim da sornyum la shim ba tang lzam ba chma me pi chagbi da ko longzin charni zev zambo kan te ndirk chim chogo zamba ramjir kyo karte zanzang gam nyamba ni chi chu tamchi chi nyamba ni chi chi sir togjan chu tamchi nyamba ni chi sangji ji chu ji nyamba ni ter ji sir togna zod sornyum da long shi zamba ramjir kyo karte ndo chag dang jer dang dang tmgi jang marpang wa de dag dang lanjig da yang mang ne ba karte jig tsog la tawa yang mafsho par drupa chig bi lamda yang song kyo ki marig ba dang chipi chepa yang mapchum bar rigba dang number chora yang mafkin sam me pi nyamba ni kyang kyo ki number chora yang sodong kyo do chora yang mayan jangba yang mayan 초진 퍽비 덴밥 지보 양 맘통와 덴밤 통화양 마யம் 레버 토바양 마연라 소수 제워강 마யம் 소수 제워 추장 마연 추장 마로 초든 퍽바양 마연 퍽바 맘퍽바양 만 추 탐치 양 더버담바 추 탐치 진드시다양 짤 초지 스톰바양 맘통 추장 마투 겐던라야 님그르 마시장 Tomba chigbo kang yamba te ndartate wokchong zokshe tang kandar je nagle ji wadang mando ji wumu wa yang takbar jarwa chandang gati wa nokchandang mapam chi lawa chandang xerwa ninji wa te tak zambir tomba te dagla te ne chodarab to shonjang tomba chigbo te kar nrowaram phagba ramjur yang drola Stavar Jerva Tamchiki Nanda Yang, Chut Chitjang, Tadang, Huijang, Marnit, Chut Mukumba Gyata Yang, Jigbadang, Tarwa Yang, Toba Meda, Chut Gunni Nyumung Badang Yang, Nyambar Jervalar, Number Shonga Yang, Kungdo Machitba, Gang Semchan Tamchi Nyumumba Mepa Di, Zimbi Yang Nyumumba Mepa Yin, Chuti Jimba Yang, Number Mavjang, Zimba Chola Satak Surnyum Jimbar Shipa, Dedag Yang, Lobar Tongra Shit. Kyodo vdat tamchet tang lanchigda nyomomba tamchet yang kyoki chuksaja nyomimbi ngowo kangyamba te zimba ngowo ni kyang teyan semchen tamchet yang kyoki vsapi sem nyevara vjaga sangje tamchet la yang kyoki shkar sangje ki chu tamchet la yang marnyambar shie gendan la yang kyod mrton jang nam yang yongsam nyangali manda na dodo kyoki sornyumda long shigi jim cherte Tambanda tele tuni Jordan de la Tirkichi daka Chirkada Shada Chirkada me Chirkada ji Nyamde Chirkada Shada Chirkada ma Chirkada ji Nyamde Chukchim member Kirne daka Honzete yang Worde Kimne Shukchir member Kimne Slarim Jor Kibana Latsamba Chama Petra Pevdala Ndirkichi Chogo Zumba Ramjur way Shiputi Yikim Tag Manjar Longzin the Longshu Zumba Ramjur and the Chirnyam the Sim Katichuji Dejan Bitura de la Tirkichi man Chirchabar and Jeram the Katirkala Rigiva Testa Mayano Jiso they love Durkis Meba Zumba Ramjur Jimmy Churi Ranjingi Chutam Chabar Mashita Techi Shirjana Sikde Tamchija di Ranjinde Delam Kebanga Ike layan machakshan dedagla chakbarayam mabshibi shiro techi shirjena ike te tamchijan ike mebat number chorana mahtokso chu tamchidan number chorium sanyedo futambando shanel hiwa nivya chu namla chu jimir dima dir mechan trimadam chara number takko Liver Ngavjaner Jisum Tumbi, Zuba Toper Girdo, Dr. Popa Mam Chipper Girne, Tela, Slar Dombi, Motode, Jundangi, Tislat of Dr. Tambati, Jun Jajam, Chever, Mustro War.
Let us continue with our teaching. We are studying the Vimalakirti Sutra. As we discussed earlier, the layman Vimalakirti fell ill. The Buddha asked his 10 great disciples to go and visit him. We have already covered this in the previous sessions. We spoke about Venerable Modgalyayana, Venerable Sariputra, and Venerable Kashyapa. They are respectively known as the one foremost in supernatural powers, the one foremost in wisdom, and the one foremost in ascetic practice. However, they did not dare to go and visit him. They were too afraid to go. The reason they did not dare to go was that something had happened in the past while they were giving a teaching, or while they were in meditation, or while they were seeking alms. Venerable Kashyapa is the Buddha's most outstanding disciple among all the Sravakas, yet even he did not dare to go and see the layman Vimalakirti. In traditional paintings, Vimalakirti is depicted as a very elderly person. We cannot be certain, but he was probably quite advanced in age. This was likely because of his great prestige. He was so well acquainted with kings and ministers that if he were very young, he might not have commanded so much respect from others. Of course, some successful young people might still earn it, but generally speaking, the layman Vimalakirti represents this kind of lay bodhisattva, a genuine practitioner living a secular life. So in the teachings of Buddhism, in reality, lay people and monastics are not all that different in certain respects. If one practices well, there are many exceptional practitioners who remain as lay people. Conversely, if one's practice is not good, even a monastic cannot penetrate the Buddha's profound intention. Their conduct might even be improper. This situation existed during the Buddha's time, and it continues today. As we continue studying this sutra, our main goal is to understand the profound intention of the layman Vimalakirti, which is essentially the same as the profound intention of Shakyamuni Buddha. Therefore, when we study this sutra, we should approach it from the most definitive and the most direct perspective. In general exoteric sutras, it is extremely rare to find such a direct teaching of the profound and definitive Dharma. This is especially true for the content we are covering today. If someone does not have a foundation in Mahayana Buddhism, or some grounding in the tantric teachings, and the principles we have been discussing recently may seem very difficult to explain. For an ordinary Buddhist practitioner, or for someone who has never systematically studied Buddhism, they might start dozing off after a while, or their mind might begin to wander. In the end, they might not be able to keep listening. So our affinity and our wisdom actually have a very close relationship. If you have the sincere desire to study a particular Dharma, it shows that the necessary conditions have come together. At the very least, it means you have the courage and the profound karmic connection to hear it. Otherwise, even if the Dharma is extremely precious, if our own mind stream lacks those conditions, we might find all kinds of excuses. You might attend the first session or two, but persisting to the very end will prove to be quite difficult. During this series, we have been sharing stories of these great masters. Each story is more fascinating than the last. I hope that all of you here can set aside all arrogance and ego clinging. You should approach this with a devoted and joyful heart, seeking this wisdom with a humble attitude of learning. Although I may not have much of value to say, there is a saying in the Tibetan region, an old dog's mouth cannot produce gold. But I am very earnestly cross-referencing the works of past masters. One advantage I have is that I understand Tibetan. So when I compare different translations, some explanations from the Tibetan version might be helpful for those researching the Vimalakirti Sutra or for those who are practicing it. I hope this provides some convenience for you. Everyone's time is very precious. If you all take this time to study together, I feel it is something very meaningful. Many people think they are doing meaningful things in this world, but actually the Dharma that leads to liberation and addresses the matter of birth and death is the wisdom that benefits all our future lives. This wisdom will surely play a vital role throughout the course of your life. Our lives are very short. We might think certain things are very beneficial, but once our journey of a few decades or years is over, it would be truly regrettable if we had not accumulated merit for our future lives. So today we will continue our study of Mahayana Buddhism as we look at the Mahayana teachings, specifically the principles in the Vimalakirti Sutra. Today we will look at the story of Subhuti. I gave a brief outline of Subhuti's story a while ago. There are certain differences between him and Venerable Kasyapa. We should look at them individually. Subhuti often preferred to go to the homes of well-off and prominent lay patrons. His purpose was not to earn more money for himself, nor was it to receive more offerings for his own benefit. His true intention was based on the fact that these wealthy and prosperous people spent their days like the gods of the desire realm, completely submerged in sensual pleasures and worldly splendor. So he went to teach them the Dharma on suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. He specifically wanted to share teachings on impermanence, to help them cut through the miserliness in their mind streams, and to bring down the mountain of their arrogance. For these reasons, he often visited wealthy households. This particular story about Subhuti is recorded with fairly similar accounts in the commentary by Master Huiyuan. There is also a sutra called the Sutra of the Bodhisattva Questions on Transforming the Female Body. Within that sutra, there is a story very similar to this one. Once Subhuti had a dream. In the dream, the Buddha told him that he should receive the new and correct Dharma. After he woke up, he went to the Buddha to ask about it. The Buddha said that he might encounter a spiritual teacher today and receive teachings on the gate of emptiness. Later, when he went out to seek alms, it happened to be at the home of a female lay bodhisattva. He went to that kind of household to seek his alms. At that point, the story follows a very similar path to the one we are discussing. He received profound teachings from her. Subhuti received the teaching of the equality of emptiness. The content is quite comparable. It is said to be from the Sutra of the Adornment of the Joyful Garland through skillful means. I tried to look it up but could not find it. Master Huiyuan was likely a contemporary of Kumarajiva. It is said that they even exchanged letters. They showed immense mutual respect for one another. Sometimes great masters living in the same era might outwardly appear to be jealous of each other. But Master Huiyuan and Kumarajiva seem to be very close. I am not sure if they ever met in person, though. So today we will follow the translation by Kumarajiva to teach this fourth story. It is the story of the encounter between Subhuti and Vimalakirti. The Buddha told Subhuti, "You should go to visit the layman Vimalakirti and inquire after his health on my behalf." This is because Subhuti is foremost in understanding emptiness. As for Subhuti, there are other stories about him in various sutras and shastras. He was a bit different from some of the other disciples. He was born into a very wealthy family. At the moment of his birth, it seemed that all the possessions in his home suddenly and completely disappeared. His parents became quite frightened by this. They said that after their child was born, everything in the house simply vanished into thin air. They wondered what on earth was happening. They quickly went to consult some astrologers. The astrologers of that time were actually very skilled. They told the parents that there was nothing to worry about. This child would grow up to be truly outstanding. He would be able to realize emptiness and be foremost in understanding it. That was his situation even back then. Thus he is named Shangxian, meaning the one of good appearance. In some Prajnaparamita sutras, he is called Subhuti. Subhuti is likely the Sanskrit name. Others refer to him as Shangxian. In Tibetan, we call him Rabbair. Different translations use different names for him. Then, after some time had passed, all the missing items in their home naturally reappeared. His mother was finally able to rest easy. Perhaps parents do not worry about other matters as much as they care about their material possessions. So he is foremost in understanding emptiness and is truly exceptional. At that time, the Buddha asked Subhuti to go on his behalf to visit the layman Vimalakirti. Subhuti said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, I also do not dare to go, to visit the layman Vimalakirti while he is ill." And what was the reason for this? He said, "I recall a time long ago when I entered his house to seek alms." In this context, his refers to the layman Vimalakirti. I remember that I went to seek alms and carry my alms bowl at that time. During that visit, I went directly to his house. His house means the home of the layman Vimalakirti. Our Tibetan version states it very directly. He entered directly into the home of the layman Vimalakirti. He was quite bold, going directly to seek out the wealthy. He did not go to those with poor people, to those who had no offerings or generosity to give. Going before such people would not have been very appropriate. When seeking alms, one should go to those with merit and fortune. So he went directly to people like that. Seeking alms is something that even now, as everyone knows, is taken very seriously in the Theravada tradition. Early Buddhism also placed great value on the practice of carrying the alms bowl. In places like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and many other regions, including Cambodia, the monastic community goes directly into the city in the morning. Then the lay practitioners offer alms to each of them one by one. This very dignified practice continues to be observed to this day. Although Chinese Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism differ somewhat from the Theravada tradition, in reality there are also many comparable practices. This is especially true when the Sangha is in retreat or during certain Vinaya ceremonies. When Subhuti went to the home of the layman Vimalakirti to seek alms, at that moment Vimalakirti first took his alms bowl away. I am just joking, it was not really confiscated. He simply took the alms bowl and filled it with food, but then he did not give it back to him immediately. Subhuti could see it very clearly. The layman Vimalakirti had already filled the bowl with very delicious food. Since his family was quite wealthy, there was certainly excellent food available. He filled it up completely and then held on to it. Then he began teaching Subhuti the Dharma. Some commentaries ask why he did it this way. It was because if he had not provided the food first, Vimalakirti feared that Subhuti would simply run away. So he first put the offerings into the bowl. If he had not done so, it might have seemed improper since Vimalakirti was a layman. As a lay person, he still maintained great respect toward monastics. Therefore, he first filled the bowl with food, and only then began to turn the Dharma wheel for him. So what exactly did he say? He said, "O Subhuti, if you are able to be universally same about eating, then the Dharmas are also universally same. If the Dharmas are universally same, you should also be universally same about eating. If you can practice begging like this, you may accept the food." His intention was to let Subhuti understand the equality of all dharmas. Actually, according to the commentaries of some great masters, in the content we are teaching today, Mara and Buddha are equal, liberation and bondage are equal, and further on, wrong dharmas and correct dharmas are also equal. It teaches several different kinds of equality. What he is saying here is that if you have realized equanimity toward food, then all dharmas are likewise equal. Originally, when Subhuti went out to seek alms, he always preferred to visit wealthy households. By avoiding poor households, he was not practicing equality. When receiving food, perhaps he also preferred better tasting things and did not want what tasted bad. Some of our Dharma friends are the same. They lack equanimity toward food. Every day they make an issue out of what they eat, complaining that this or that does not taste good. They say it is too spicy, too salty, or too bland. They feel that nothing is quite right every single day. This shows a clear lack of equanimity toward food. The layman Vimalakirti says that if you have realized equanimity toward food, as the Buddha teaches in the sutras, the Buddha also regarded food for horses and food for the gods as being of completely the same taste and substance. Once you have attained this kind of equanimity, if you have truly realized equality toward food, then by analogy, all dharmas are completely equal. If one sees the emptiness of one dharma, one sees the emptiness of all dharmas, just as Aryadeva taught. This dharma is equal with no high or low. Am I speaking too fast? There are even more flowers today. The Diamond Sutra says that this dharma is equal with no high or low. So if you have realized equanimity toward food, all dharmas are equal. Conversely, if one has realized the equality of all dharmas, one has also realized equanimity toward food. So on the surface, it might seem to be only a series of questions about food, but in reality, it touches on a very profound meaning. Therefore, if you understand this kind of principle, you may then take the food. This is one aspect of it. Then continuing the conversation with Subhuti, he speaks in terms of the tantric teachings. This is a direct pointing out method for a profound pith instruction. The tantric teachings often involve recognizing the nature of licentiousness, anger, and stupidity. Licentiousness, anger, and stupidity are actually neither to be abandoned nor grasped. There is nothing to abandon and nothing to grasp. Their original face is just as it is. Their original face is simply themselves. But if we try to express this with language and words, then it cannot be done. Language and words are all pale and unable to express it. The true nature of all phenomena is actually just like this. Whether you understand it or not, it remains just as it is. So below it we'll likely discuss the teaching on the equality of afflictions and wisdom. These are the types of teachings involved. At that time, the layman Vimalakirti said, "If, Subhuti, you refrain from eradicating licentiousness, anger, and stupidity, yet are not equipped with them," here he is telling Subhuti not to sever licentiousness, anger, and stupidity. Ordinarily, according to the conventional teachings of Buddhism, we must first sever licentiousness, anger, and stupidity, and then manifest the wisdom that is free from these three poisons. Only then can we attain true liberation. This is how we usually approach our practice. Everything arising from licentiousness, anger, and stupidity is considered non-virtue. The precious garland also states this clearly. Originally, this is the standard path we follow. But the teaching here is quite different from our ordinary way of thinking. It says that licentiousness, anger, and stupidity do not actually need to be severed. But if one does not sever them, does that mean one is still filled with licentiousness, anger, and stupidity? Not at all. It also does not mean that you exist simultaneously with them. So if they are neither existing nor severed, then what exactly is going on? In reality, their very nature is simply like this. There is nothing to sever, nothing that is permanent, nothing to abandon, and nothing to grasp. It is just as it is. In the general exoteric tradition, we first discard licentiousness, anger, and stupidity to attain bodhi. This is a very common teaching, but in the Mahayana, and especially in the Vajrayana, the very nature of licentiousness, anger, and stupidity is itself wisdom. The Platform Sutra says, afflictions are themselves bodhi. If the preceding thought is confused, one is an ordinary being. If the following thought is awakened, one is a Buddha. If the preceding thought is attached to objects, that is affliction. If the following thought is free from objects, that is bodhi. So afflictions are indeed bodhi. The preceding thought of confusion makes one an ordinary being, but if the following thought is different, it is all within the difference of a single thought. If our preceding thought is attached to an object, then it becomes an affliction. But if we recognize its true nature, it has already become bodhi. Thus, licentiousness, anger, and stupidity are not truly inherent in us, nor do they actually need to be severed. This principle is only found within Mahayana Buddhism and the Tantric teachings. There is a text called the Sutra of Various Parables. I recall a story within this sutra that is quite similar to the principle we are discussing. Long ago, there was a bodhisattva named Zigen, or joyful root. The character Shi means joy and Gen means root. He often taught about the Dharma of true nature, which is the most profound teaching on being free from licentiousness, anger, and stupidity. At that time, Manjushri Bodhisattva also appeared in the form of a bhikshu. However, he taught about the laws of cause and effect and focused on the impurity of phenomena. He was an ascetic bhikshu. Later, when he heard the teachings on true nature from Bodhisattva Shigen, he found it very difficult to accept. The Dharma of true nature that Bodhisattva Shigen taught emphasized that the path and licentiousness, anger, and stupidity are all equal. He would explain this profound principle. Later, the ascetic bhikshu went around teaching about the impurity of the world as his primary Dharma approach. One day, he visited the home of one of Bodhisattva Shigen's disciples. But the disciple also shared many teachings on the Dharma of true nature with him. The bhikshu became displeased and gave rise to a mind of hatred. Later, that disciple specially composed a work similar to the 70 verses on emptiness, consisting of 70 stanzas. Every single stanza praised the Dharma of true nature and the state free from licentiousness, anger, and stupidity. Each time the disciple recited a stanza, the ascetic bhikshu would give rise to a moment of hatred. By the time the disciple finished all 70 stanzas, the bhikshu had given rise to 70 minds of hatred. Because of this karmic result, he later fell into the hell realms and experienced great suffering for a very long time. Eventually, he was finally liberated. At the time of his liberation, because he had previously encountered the Dharma of true nature and these teachings on emptiness, this karmic seed allowed him to later become Manjushri, who is foremost in understanding emptiness. So even Manjushri Bodhisattva had this history, though today his wisdom is truly outstanding. When we visit Mount Wu Tai, we always seek out Manjushri Bodhisattva. But if Manjushri Bodhisattva does not appear to us, perhaps we should say something to him. Do you still remember when you once held wrong views toward Mahayana Buddhism, and how wretched you were in hell back then. Now you look quite impressive and powerful. Quite powerful indeed, you know. Many of you probably do not understand this local phrase. But Manjushri Bodhisattva truly had this kind of experience in the past. Precisely for this reason, the Mahaprajna Paramita Sastra says, the path and licentiousness, anger and stupidity are of one equal dharma. If a person is frightened upon hearing this, they are still far from the Buddha's path. Licentiousness, anger and stupidity are actually equal to all phenomena. If one hears that licentiousness, anger and stupidity are equal to all phenomena, or that they do not need to be abandoned, some people might feel quite frightened. But there is really no need to be afraid. In reality, this is the most profound kind of dharma. So today we are discussing the principle that these three poisons need not be abandoned. This might be very hard to accept within the exoteric tradition. Everyone, please do not be afraid, because for a sincere Buddhist practitioner, they have often been trained in the ideal of avoiding evil and practicing virtue, with a focus on cutting off licentiousness, anger, and stupidity. That has been their guiding principle. So when a tantric view like this is presented, it can easily lead to wrong views or a feeling of being unable to accept it. This kind of situation is bound to arise. Now let us continue with the next part. If you do not destroy the body, yet accord with the single characteristic. This refers to not destroying the body view, or satkaya drishti. Ordinarily, it is only after we destroy this satkaya drishti that we can realize the one sign of no self. The one sign means the state of one taste, which is achieved by an eighth Bhumi Bodhisattva, or a state where emptiness and the true nature are indistinguishable. Usually we think that we must first destroy the satkaya drishti and self-view to realize the one sign of no self. But here it is not taught in that way. It says we do not need to destroy the satkaya drishti to directly enter the state of no self. By ordinary standards, this is also very hard to accept. If you do not extinguish stupidity and affection, yet generate wisdom and emancipation, normally we must extinguish stupidity and the attachment of affection, such as the craving mentioned in the 12 links of dependent origination, before we can attain the fruition of the threefold wisdom and 8 liberations. But here the teaching is different. You do not need to extinguish the ignorance of stupidity, nor do you need to extinguish the licentiousness and clinging to the 5 desires. Instead, you directly attain what? You directly attain the qualities of the threefold wisdom and 8 liberations. Generally speaking, this is very hard to imagine. Indeed, many of these principles are found in our tantric texts on direct pointing out of the nature of mind, such as the 7 treasuries. The treasury of the Dharma Dhatu directly teaches these truths. The treasury of the true nature also teaches them directly. Aside from these, many in the exoteric tradition probably find it difficult to introduce such concepts. I notice that in some modern exoteric commentaries, when the authors arrive at this point, they become extremely brief and gloss over it very quickly. Regarding this entire section on Subhuti, I see that Mr. Nan Huai Jin and others discuss the earlier parts quite extensively, connecting the teachings to traditional culture. However, when they reach these points, they only give a simple example, without saying whether it is good or bad, and then move on directly. It is not that they do not understand, but perhaps they had not previously explored this particular area with great depth. Looking at the various commentaries, including those in English and Chinese, most of them are essentially the same. The teaching given to Subhuti today is still very profound. Specifically, if one lacks a basic foundation in the tantric teachings, I feel that the teacher may not necessarily be able to explain it well, and the listener may not necessarily understand it either. This is even more true for the practitioner. So for this session, whether we are listening or teaching, at least we have some understanding of the tantric view of the equality of purity and impurity. Because of this should be a teaching that we feel quite connected to, right? Not only do we not need to avoid it, but by speaking directly, each sentence can be expanded into many profound principles. Next, it speaks of if you use the characteristics of the 5 transgressions to attain emancipation. Normally, we focus on eliminating the 5 heinous crimes. We are told not to commit them, which include patricide and matricide, killing an arhat or an acharya, drawing blood from a Buddha, and creating a schism in the Sangha. Only by not committing these 5 heinous crimes can liberation be attained. But here it is not said that way. It says through the appearance of the 5 heinous crimes, at the very moment of patricide or matricide, you attain liberation. This is sometimes taught within the 12 Vajra laughters of our tantric tradition. It says those who commit the 5 heinous crimes and those who make offerings to the Buddhas of the 3 times are completely equal. Samantabhadra Tathagata has proclaimed many such teachings. Ordinary people find this very hard to accept. They ask how someone who commits these crimes can directly attain liberation without any confession at all. That makes it a bit difficult to explain. But the explanation has already been given here. Committing the 5 heinous crimes is in reality a type of mental confusion. Once the nature of this confusion is recognized, the so-called 5 heinous crimes completely evaporate. In this way, liberation can indeed be attained. Whether such a view exists in the exoteric tradition should be clear to everyone, without either emancipation or bondage. In the exoteric tradition, one attains liberation after freeing oneself from afflictive and cognitive obstructions. Only after all these bonds are cast off is liberation achieved. But in the ultimate true nature, there is no such thing as liberation or bondage. As the Uttara Tantra Shastra teaches,
number
the habitual tendencies of the 3 spheres are the cognitive obstructions. Conceptual thoughts like miserliness are the afflictive obstructions. Ordinarily, these kinds of obstructions exist. Whether they are cognitive or afflictive, you must untie them. After they are untied, liberation is attained. You attain liberation from within bondage. But in the true nature, liberation and bondage are actually the same. When the master was composing the Vajrakilaya Gurhukma in Nepal, he included a Vajra song within it. It says that a rope of grass and a chain of gold bind in exactly the same way. So if we are attached to liberation, that attachment itself is a kind of bondage. If you do not perceive the 4 noble truths, yet do not fail to perceive the truths. We speak of seeing the 4 noble truths: suffering, origination, cessation, and the path. On a conventional level, they are indeed seen. But when arriving at the truly ultimate meaning, Vimalakirti says that you have nothing that can be seen which is not seeing, because within the nature, not seeing is the supreme seeing. Vimalakirti says there is nothing to see and that one does not see the 4 noble truths. But if we say one does not see the 4 noble truths, is this not seeing something real? No, it is not. Saying that one sees the 4 noble truths is also incorrect, because in the ultimate sense there is nothing to see. Then does a kind of emptiness or a mere emptiness of not seeing the 4 noble truths exist? This is not the case either. In some current translations, these principles might be explained by saying that the practitioner does not see them like an ordinary person does, but that their life is fully consistent with the 4 noble truths. Different translations offer different explanations, but we cannot arbitrarily alter the true teachings of Buddhism. What is being taught here is that both seeing and not seeing the 4 noble truths are absent. Whether we see or do not see, the truth simply is what it is. This is a very deep perspective from Vimalakirti, isn't it? Actually, that famous poem is not by Changyang Gyatso. Neither attaining the results nor not attaining the results. It is not about attaining fruition in the way taught in the Shravaka tradition, such as becoming an arhat, a once-returner, or a non-returner. In reality, this kind of attainment is absent. Then is it like ordinary people who do not attain fruition? Are we saying they attain no fruition at all, just like us? Spending every day eating, drinking, and playing without any spiritual progress. Is it like this? No, it is not like that either. In fact, attaining and not attaining fruition are only labels established by our conceptual minds. In the true nature of reality, both attaining and not attaining are just extremes that do not exist. Similarly, the concepts of ordinary beings and non-ordinary beings, including worldly ordinary people and non-ordinary beings who have departed from ordinary ways, these two are also just extremes, and they are ultimately the same. Is the state of ordinary beings in our world the true nature? No, it is not. If it is not the state of ordinary beings, is there a mere emptiness that exists apart from them, or a true nature of not being an ordinary being? That is not the case either. By the same logic, it is neither being a sage nor not being a sage. Do Aryas like Manjushri Bodhisattva and Samantabhadra Bodhisattva have a fixed true nature? No. And beyond that, does the state of a non-sage like an ordinary person exist as a true nature? It is not like that either. True sages and non-sages, or ordinary and non-ordinary beings, are only constructed extremes. Permanence and impermanence are extremes. Existence and non-existence are also extremes. The wise abide in the middle. This is the meaning of the Madhyamaka path. So that is why it speaks here of sages and non-sages, accomplishing all the dharmas, yet transcending the characteristics of the dharmas. In our actual lives, although all dharmas can be accomplished, every dharma should exist in the manner of a dreamlike illusion. But in reality, these dharmas are also free from all signs. The Diamond Sutra also says, if one sees all signs as non-signs, one then sees the Tathagata. If you see signs, you must realize they are not actually signs. Understanding this principle is what it means to truly see the Tathagata. The Avatamsaka Sutra also says, deeply penetrating dependent origination and entering the Dharma Dhatu, one sees conditioned phenomena as reflections in a mirror. As taught in the Avatamsaka Sutra, once we have penetrated dependent origination and emptiness and entered the Dharma Dhatu, appearances are still present, just like reflections in a mirror, but their fixed true nature is absent. This includes conditioned dharmas and all the dharmas that appear before our minds. They should be unfindable. If you have understood this principle, then you may take the bowl from my hand. At that point, Subhuti had probably been wanting to eat for a long time. He sat there as Vimalakirti explained these truths to him layer by layer. He was likely worried about whether his food had gone cold, or if the food would even be given to him at all. But he was also a bit uneasy, because his usual views were somewhat at odds with what was being taught. In his heart there was a little panic and doubt about not receiving the food. There was a bit of worry too, because he did not fully understand the views being expressed. Some of our Dharma friends are similar when attending class. They listen very intently and earnestly the whole time, yet they still find it impossible to understand. Sometimes most people in the world do not have very good memories. Once the lecture is over, they have forgotten everything. That happens sometimes as well. True geniuses and truly wise people are not very many in number. Still, some people have a very good attitude towards study and reflection. Then continuing below, the text says, Subhuti. At this point, he is probably even more frightened. Just look at what follows. I wonder if we will be able to finish this today. We must finish it today, right? What we just discussed was still relatively simple, dealing with sages and ordinary beings and how these principles are equal. In reality, the teachings given to Subhuti are quite profound. Because he is a Mahayana bhikshu, he has a very good foundation in the teachings on emptiness. That is why Vimalakirti did not teach Venerable Kashyapa with this much depth. There are still certain differences between them. Subhuti, you should only accept this food if you can neither see the Buddha nor hear the Dharma, and also does not draw near to the Sangha. Vimalakirti continued to tell Subhuti, from now on you must not go to see the Buddha, listen to the Dharma, or attend to the Sangha. Just follow these 6 heterodox teachers instead. Subhuti must have been very frightened. Vimalakirti told him that from today onward, even though he was originally a Buddhist, and such a fine bhikshu who was foremost in understanding emptiness, he would still be terrified by such a demand. If we went to rely on a master, and he told us that we should no longer hear the Dharma, that we should no longer go to see the Buddha, and that we should stay away from the Sangha to follow these 6 heterodox teachers, we would be shocked. We often talk about these 6 heterodox teachers. During the month of miracles, the Buddha competed with them. Later, the Buddha used supernatural powers to subjugate them. These 6 teachers came from different castes in 6 great cities, and the Buddha subdued them one by one. In some parts of India today, there are still commemorative sites for them, including some small stupas. So who exactly are these 6 heterodox teachers? One is Purana Kashyapa. He mainly taught that everything is empty, meaning that things like filial piety do not really exist. He primarily propagated a school of mere emptiness. He was that kind of teacher. Another is named Maskarin Goshal Putra. This school believes that all the suffering and happiness of worldly beings arise without any cause or reason at all. Some people nowadays think this way too. They complain that the heavens have been unfair to them, whatever problems they face. They never consider what they might have done in their past lives. They just think, I have done so many good things, so why has fate been so unkind to me? Why is my life so miserable? Why am I so unlucky? Actually, these people generally do not understand cause and effect. They do not admit that they had past lives or that they created their own causes in the past. Since they do not understand these principles, They are just like this school that believes things arise without a cause. They believe that is how it works. Then there is Samjaya and Vairatputra. This school mainly believes that after a very long cycle of birth and death, all of one's obstacles will eventually be removed, and liberation will be attained gradually. They believe that after a long enough period in samsara, one will naturally become liberated. There is also Ajitake Shakambala. This school mainly mistakes non-causes for causes. For instance, they think bathing in the Ganges River can remove obstacles, or that burning one's body with 5 fires can clear away karmic debt. They are a school that accepts these kinds of beliefs. Then there is Kakuda Katyayana. This school simply follows the ways of the world. In other words, if the world says something exists, they accept it. If the world says it does not exist, they accept that too. They follow worldly conventions in everything. They have no unique perspective of their own. That is that kind of school. The last one is Nigrantha Jatiputra. This one is very similar to modern Jainism, specifically the naked ascetic school. They believe that practicing as a naked ascetic removes obstacles. They still follow many principles of cause and effect. They do not kill animals or eat meat. And when they walk, they tie small bells to their feet to drive away insects so they don't step on them. These are the 6 great schools commonly known as the 6 heterodox teachers. Just now, Vimalakirti was telling Subhuti that he should just follow these teachers. These are your masters now, he said. Go and continue your life as a monk with them. If they fall into lower realms, you should fall with them. If you have the spirit and the courage to do that, then come and take your food. Subhuti was getting more and more frightened by this. It seems Subhuti was in the most difficult position compared to the others, because the teaching given to him directly challenged his Buddhist faith. For the others, the teachings were brief and did not conflict so severely with their core beliefs. But what follows is even more intense regarding his views. Actually, some people believe, as they have told me, I have studied the Vimalakirti Sutra, but in reality I am not sure if they truly understood it. I wonder if they grasped the more profound principles within this scripture. I am not sure if they were really understood. Actually, from the perspective of a Buddhist's view, these are quite significant conflicts. If you were in such a situation, imagine how you would respond. For instance, if we went to seek alms and handed our alms bowl to a layperson, and they held on to it and refused to give it back, insisting that you take refuge in some other teacher instead, what would you do? Would you just leave the bowl there or something else? Everyone should think about this. If you were Subhuti, what would you do? Vimalakirti continued his discourse. The layman Vimalakirti continued to tell Subhuti, if Subhuti, you can enter into the heterodox views and not reach the other shore. These include nihilistic views and eternalist views, and there are 64 kinds of such wrong views. He said it is best for you to hold these wrong views. Do not go to the other shore of prajna, which is the shore of emptiness. Do not realize emptiness at all. Abide in the 8 difficulties and not attain the absence of difficulty. You must dwell in what we call the 8 leisureless states, which refers to the realms of hell, hungry ghosts and animals, as well as the long life heavens, border regions, and areas of wrong views. It refers to those kinds of places. You should just keep dwelling in the realms of hell, hungry ghosts, and animals. When we scold people, we sometimes speak like this. For example, some parents in Tibetan often say this when scolding their children. They might say, no, may you fall into hell, or may you be reborn as an animal. Vimalakirti said that you should stay in the 8 difficulties and the 8 leisureless states. Do not attain a place of leisure that is suitable for practicing and studying the Dharma, and you should constantly abide with the afflictions of licentiousness, anger, and stupidity. Do not be pure, and may you be separated from all pure dharmas. He told him to just merge together with licentiousness, anger, and stupidity every day. Do not reach these pure dharmas of nirvana and liberation. Do not penetrate these pure dharmas at all. Attain the samadhi of non-contention. But if you have the samadhi of non-contention, which is a pure samadhi free from afflictions and dispute, then all beings can also attain it. So do not think you have attained anything special. Actually, any pure samadhi concentration that you have reached is something they can attain as well. Those who give to you are not good people. Those who make offerings to you, including me, since the layman Vimalakirti was also preparing to give him alms, he said, if someone makes an offering to you, they cannot be called a field of merit. Originally, making an offering to a monastic who is foremost in understanding emptiness would make the donor a field of merit. But from another perspective, Vimalakirti said, if someone makes an offering to you, that person is bad. He is not a good field of merit. If someone makes an offering to you, this person will certainly fall into the 3 lower realms. If you join hands with the host of Maras and make them your co-workers, in other words, you are working shoulder to shoulder and cooperating with Mara's company. As we often say, you are frequently keeping company with them. You are making Mara your companion. You are making Mara your partner. This part seems to appear only once in the Tibetan version, but the Chinese version has it twice. I looked at the translations by Wu Jiqian and those from the Tang dynasty and found that some have 2 instances while others have only 1. You can check those for yourselves later. The first part here says, you are with Mara's company, with Mara as your companion. Then the second passage says, if you do not differentiate yourself from the host of Maras and the sensory troubles, this means you are as one with host of Maras. The phrase sensory troubles refers to all types of afflictions. It means all afflictions are your companions. In some of our commentaries, the earlier part about join hands with the host of Maras is also absent in the Tibetan version. Some commentaries do not include it either. It seems that having more text is also acceptable, but if it is there, that is fine too. In any case, the point is that we usually say we should be far from host of Maras. We do not want to dwell together with Mara, right? But the layman Vimalakirti said, in the future you should just go along with the Mara king. Let afflictions be your companions. When someone speaks to us in such severe terms, we should not take it to heart or be offended. We shouldn't think, you are a bad person, a demon, or a thief. Actually, this was just Vimalakirti giving us a verse of blessing, because we are especially afraid of Mara when we are in a certain place and see something frightening. We wonder if there's a demon there. But in reality, both the true Mara and the various obstacles we encounter in our practice do not exist in the true nature of reality. When a person truly has to face this and gain some realization in this area, they will see that for themselves. This is actually a very good thing. In the true nature of things, whether you read the biography of Milarepa or books on Dzogchen, you will see that Mara and Buddha are completely of one substance. In terms of appearance, Mara and Buddha are separate. Some sutras also mention, for instance, Paranirmita Vashavatin, who is known as a Mara king. When he sees many people cultivating the meditative concentrations of the form and formless realms, he is not afraid. He feels they are just his subjects, so he doesn't mind. When he sees successful people in the desire realm, he is also not afraid. But what he fears most is when people attain the fruition of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, because then they completely disappear from his field of vision. He is quite concerned about that. But if we speak primarily from the perspective of the true nature of reality, it is just as the layman Vimalakirti said, you should go along with Mara and be at one with all afflictions. If any of us were told this, we would react by saying, why should I be with Mara? I will not be with Mara. If someone says, you go and dwell with Mara, it reminds me of when we were children playing together and sometimes getting into fights. When we fought, we would start insulting each other. We would say things like, you are very ugly. If we could not think of a better reply, we would immediately say, you are also very ugly. So if someone tells me to go along with Mara, we would probably immediately reply, you should go along with Mara too. That is likely what we would say. But in reality, for someone who has penetrated the equality of purity and impurity, being together with Mara is actually very good. Being with Mara is perfectly fine. Being with celestial beings is also fine. And being with the Buddhas is fine as well. We should think, what is the big deal? You do not differentiate yourself. This is because the nature of afflictions and the nature of Mara itself is also your own nature. It is nothing special. The Tibetan version also explains it this way. So there is really no difference between them at all. Whether it is Mara, celestials, or Buddhas, there is nothing to distinguish. If you bear resentment toward all sentient beings, Vimalakirti further says that you should have a mind to harm all beings. By resentment, he means you should think, may I kill all beings. These words seem quite uncomfortable. Originally, we are taught not to kill any being, not even harming a single hair of any living creature. But Vimalakirti says, Subhuti, from now on you must harm all beings. May you give rise to a mind that wants to kill all beings. He also says that you should revile the Buddha, denigrate the Dharma, and do not enter the Sangha. And if you never attain extinction, he says that you should always revile the Buddha. May you always denigrate the Dharma. Do not enter the Sangha. Always keep company with people of wrong knowledge and wrong views. When it is stated this way, it is actually a perspective that has already surpassed the ordinary standards of practice by far. And it presents quite a massive challenge. What we ordinarily care about so much, like slandering the Buddha, is a very frightening thing to us. Committing the 5 heinous crimes is also very frightening. But according to some of the higher realizations in the Tantric tradition, I believe many of us, especially those who have studied related knowledge before, can completely accept this point. Even if you have not studied these higher realizations of Tantra, there are many similar ideas in the Chan tradition as well. Consider the old story of Dangxia burning the Buddha. One winter, he burned the wooden Buddha statues in the monastery. He burned them to make a fire for warmth. When someone asked him what he was doing, he replied that he wanted to extract some sarira from the Buddha statue. There are many stories like this. There was also the Chan master Mazudaoyi, who would often spit on the Buddha statues. At the time, many people found this incredibly shocking. They told him, "You cannot do this. One must not spit on a Buddha statue." But he replied that all the 10 directions are composed of dust motes, and every single dust mote contains a Buddha, so where is there no Buddha? He held that kind of realization. In Tibet, there was also a master called Drukpa Kanli. He was much like the monk Jigong, an extraordinary and miraculous person. He did many unconventional things. Once a Dharma assembly was being held at a monastery. Some Buddha statues were being consecrated there. An old woman had commissioned a very fine thangka of a Buddha image and was preparing to take it to the monastery for consecration. On her way, she encountered Master Drukpa Kanli. He asked her where she was going. She replied, "I requested a Buddha image and am going to the monastery for consecration." He said, "I will consecrate it for you, just open it up." After she opened it, he urinated on it. He completely soiled the Buddha image. The old woman found it completely unacceptable and was deeply saddened. She then took it to the monastery and spoke with the monks there. The monks recognized the signs of that master's accomplishment. They told her this was the work of a great Mahasiddha. We ordinary monks are unable to perform such a powerful consecration. When they opened it and looked closer, the Buddha image not only had no damage whatsoever, but it also showed many rare signs of profound realization. Actually, in our world, ordinary concepts lead us to believe that afflictions are just afflictions. We think they are dirty, chaotic, and bad. But in reality, when truly held by the wisdom of prajna emptiness, all appearances are the wondrous power of emptiness. Within such a state, the traces of dualistic concepts are very hard to find. Recently, I read a story about a great master from the Tibetan region. This master was called Guosheng, and when he was translating, he knew exactly when he would pass away. Everything was completely clear to him. Then one of his attendants went to the Dakini Vaisaravi and said, "Our master passed away this morning. I have brought these offerings for you." The Dakini then asked, "How did he pass away this morning?" The attendant replied that when the master got up, he had previously shown some signs of illness, but today there seemed to be nothing wrong. The attendant said that the master had communicated everything that needed to be settled. Then he called the attendant to come before him. When the attendant arrived, he saw the master's reliquary box, known in Tibet as a dingang. A dingang is a box used to contain the supports of the 3 jewels. The master said, "Bring me that dingang box." After it was opened, there were 3 furba daggers inside. He took out one of the furba daggers and said, "This is the principal furba dagger. Today I am going to receive the 4 empowerments." He was referring to the 4 empowerments of Vajrakila. He directed the dagger toward 4 spots on his body to receive the empowerment. Then there were 2 more furba daggers. One was the activity furba and the other was the Mara subduing furba. He then performed various hand gestures with different mudras. He said, "In this lifetime I have already finished using these furba daggers. If you want to use them, that is fine. Or you can give them to others." Then he took the blessing objects from the box, including his own master's Dharma robes and hair. He ate some nectar pills that were inside. Then he took more of the master's hair and clothes and burned them with fire. Afterward, he ate the ashes himself. It seemed he also recited some mantras. After finishing the recitation, he said, "All the matters of this lifetime are now complete and perfect." Then he uttered, "Ah, ah, ah." Ah is a symbol of emptiness that is free from all obstruction. When he had recited Ah 3 times, he very auspiciously manifested his passing into parinirvana. When we look at the biographies of the great masters of the past, we see that they were very free in the face of birth and death. The master had completely penetrated the nature of birth and death. He was without any obstruction whatsoever. Vimalakirti said that if you understand this level of realization, then you can take this food. At this time, Subhuti said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, when I heard the words spoken by the layman Vimalakirti, I became completely bewildered. The Tibetan and other translations describe it as if a great darkness had descended over his head. He did not know what to do or which direction to turn. After hearing so many profound chant teachings, which were spoken to him continuously, he was totally lost and did not know how to respond. He did not know what to say. He had no idea how to answer. He then left his alms bowl in the house and tried his hardest to flee from the scene. This was because he had been told to take refuge in heterodox traditions and perform many similar actions. As we saw earlier, being told to slander the Buddha and take refuge in other traditions presented a very serious problem for him. So he prepared to run away. At that moment, Vimalakirti shouted out to him, "Subhuti, Subhuti, do not run away. Your alms bowl is still here. There is no need to be afraid. Take your alms bowl and do not be afraid." Why did he say this? He used the example of a person conjured by the Tathagata asking these questions. What was described above happened because Subhuti had become frightened. Actually, there is no reason to be afraid. If a transformation body of the Tathagata said these things, would you be afraid? Hearing this, his mind became a bit calmer. He said that if it were a conjured being, he would not be so afraid. Subhuti replied, "No, I would not." He explained that if a truly real Dharma existed, then these words would be especially terrifying. He also said he would never follow those heterodox traditions. But if it is truly unreal, and if everything is just a conjured appearance, then he would likely not be afraid at all. His mind grew even more peaceful. At this point, Vimalakirti said, "All dharmas are like conjured appearances. If I am a conjured being and you are not afraid of me, then you should know that you too are a conjured being." What was just said was also conjured. All dharmas are completely dreamlike and illusory conjured appearances. You should not be afraid now. We truly experience various fears sometimes. Fear is a part of our lives. Many people today lack a sense of security and feel especially afraid. They carry a constant feeling of fear at all times. This fear might be brought about by external circumstances, or perhaps by the various pressures of life. However, if one truly recognizes emptiness, or has studied and reflected on Madhyamaka, I believe they would not develop this kind of anxiety disorder. Even among Buddhists, some worry if they are becoming depressed. We hear that even some Khenpos and Khenmas are quite afraid. They ask themselves, am I getting depression? I think it would be difficult to explain if someone who teaches emptiness were to suffer from depression themselves. I feel that such a thing should be absolutely impossible. Perhaps they are just worried about it. They might wonder what they would do if it happened, but truly falling into depression should not happen to them, whether it is our teaching assistants or other Dharma masters. The reality is that we often take life too seriously and become too attached. Generally speaking, you should put in your greatest effort to do what needs to be done. But if this conjured appearance collapses, it does not matter. We should not view our lives as something that is truly existent. Once your perception changes, it is like a child playing at the seashore. We work very hard on our tasks, but if the sandcastle we built collapses, we can simply say, so be it. Conventionally, these dharmas cannot withstand any deep scrutiny. Therefore, there is no need to be so fearful. Why is that? In reality, all speech does not depart from signs. From the perspective of a wise person, one is not attached to words and remains without fear. The Lankavatara Sutra says, like a fool who takes the finger for the moon, those who delight in names and words do not know my true Dharma. It is just like certain foolish people. When we point at the moon, they do not look at the moon but only at the finger. By the same logic, those of us who are overly attached to words always focus all their efforts on the literal text. They do not seek the true meaning that the words are intended to express. Therefore, in both the Chan tradition and our Dzogchen, words are not established as ultimate. From the most ultimate perspective, relying solely on words is actually a kind of demonic speech. In the past, there were two Chan masters, Chan Master Guishan and Chan Master Yangshan. While they were engaging in Chan dialogue, Chan Master Guishan asked, "Of the 12 divisions of the Tripitaka, how much was spoken by the Buddha and how much by Mara?" Chan Master Yangshan replied, "It was all spoken by Mara. From our ordinary perspective as Buddhists, this sounds very frightening, but in reality, ultimate truth has no sign of words. From the Buddha's awakening to his nirvana, not a single word was truly spoken. This is the most definitive teaching of the sutras." However, many of us might not necessarily understand this. We still cling to words and establish dharmic signs. This is not the most ultimate realization. Why? Because the self-nature of words is something to be departed from. The nature of letters transcends their characteristics, though there are no letters. This is emancipation, and the characteristic of emancipation is the dharmas. If we have moved beyond the self-nature of words, that is liberation. One who truly embodies the sign of liberation has already realized the true nature of all dharmas. When the layman Vimalakirti taught this dharma, 200 gods attained purification of their dharma eyes. Additionally, 500 celestials attained dharma acceptance. In different versions of the text, including the Japanese and Tibetan versions, it is noted that 500 celestials attained dharma acceptance. However, the Tang Dynasty translation says 20,000 celestial sons attained the purity of the Dharma-eye. There is a slight discrepancy here, but in any case, the specific numbers vary across different accounts. It is sometimes like the news. One report might say one thing, while another report about the same event gives different details. So different versions and translations have their own specific accounts. While 200 is more common, the Tang version mentions 20,000. So after Vimalakirti taught this dharma, this many people were able to attain liberation. Subhuti eventually also gained realization through what the layman Vimalakirti taught him. These teachings are very similar to our tantric teachings. They speak of the true nature of licentiousness, anger, and stupidity, and the nature of afflictions and wrong views. They show that there is no difference between heterodox traditions and the teacher, or between the 5 heinous crimes and making offerings to the Buddhas. These principles are typically only found in the Tantras, within the most profound pith instructions. Without this kind of foundation and previous study, it is true that these principles would be difficult, even for a Buddhist who has been practicing for 20 years and recites Amitabha every single day. Hearing that licentiousness, anger, and stupidity need not be abandoned might cause them to flee, just as Subhuti did. I am very happy that no one has run away from here today. Of course, I am not currently holding an alms bowl either, so regardless, it seems many people are able to accept this. Truly, for all of you, the principles of the tantric and exoteric traditions are completely consistent at the most ultimate level. I believe that this time as well, most of our listeners have gained some personal realization of this. I am speaking from the heart when I say I am very happy. Why is that? Normally, when discussing profound dharmas like transforming the 3 poisons into the path, or using afflictions as the path, without empowerments or preliminary practices, according to the specific teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, sharing these things might not be permitted. In my heart, I really want to teach this so we can all understand more deeply. When facing afflictions, adversity, and suffering, everyone should possess this kind of wisdom and ability. One should know the true nature of all phenomena. However, such opportunities have often been quite rare. Each time we teach Tantra, we are limited by certain conditions. But this time, as mentioned before, this text serves as a common teaching for both exoteric and esoteric traditions. Furthermore, this sutra was spoken directly by the Buddha and Vimalakirti. It carries very powerful blessings. So I can see that many of you, after hearing Vimalakirti's words and studying the Vimalakirti Sutra, may have gained an uncommon view of Mahayana Buddhism. This kind of view is the most important thing that any individual can gain. We will conclude our teaching here for today. Tomorrow we will have one more session on the Vimalakirti Sutra. I am not sure who will be questioned tomorrow.
Bandar Bandangara Padmasada Bandangara Padmasada